UK want to press pause because so much goes on in this world and in this country. Not all of it is good, I can tell you that. But one of the things that I really actually don't think gets enough focus and attention is the absolute dire state of our finances. Get this, last month alone, we borrowed £20.7 billion. We spent 16 billion or so on interest payments alone. It is an absolute shambles. Let's listen to our Chancellor and what she has to say about it.
As it is today, with the uncertainties, the geopolitical uncertainties, the trade uncertainties, but also the increase in the global issuance of government debt. Take the US or Germany, for example. All of those things are pushing up government bond yields, pushing up the cost of borrowing, including for the UK.
Liam Halligan, hello. What a treat to have you with us tonight. I mean, I read a piece that you'd written as well in The Telegraph about this, and you are really sounding alarm bells now, and you have been for a while, to give you credit for this. And, you know, you echo my concern that it's not been given enough attention and focus. Just tell us a little bit more about the dire state of our finances.
Well, the first thing I'd say, not just because my old friend Matthew Larser is here, is that Labour had a really terrible inheritance from the Tories. When Labour came into office in July 2024, the tax burden was already approaching a 70-year high, and the national debt was already approaching about 95% of GDP. But I'm afraid since then, Rachel Reeves has made the situation much, much worse. She's hiked tax rates a lot more, not least in her October budget. And as she hiked tax rates, not least that national insurance increase for employers that many GBNews viewers and listeners will know all about because it's led to a plunge in hiring, that has led to less national insurance revenue because there are fewer jobs. Hiking capital gains tax rates has led to less capital gains revenue because people aren't selling their assets. The economy is stalled by this high taxation, even higher tax rates that she's brought in. And now we're in a situation where, as you rightly said in your introduction, Doobs, we're borrowing huge amounts of money. The national debt is 2.7 trillion. What does that mean? It means 42 grand for every person in the country. It's absolutely horrendous. And what's a billion? A billion is 1,000 million. A trillion is 1,000 billion. These are mind-blowing numbers. And we're now in the situation, it doesn't give me any pleasure to say this, it's a situation that was in part created by the Tories but made a lot worse by Labour, where of the money we're borrowing, and we borrowed £150 billion last year in the single financial year, of that 150 billion, 110 billion went paying interest on our previous debts, right? That's what economists call a Ponzi scheme. It's completely unsustainable. The political and media class, Labour, Tories, Reform, the whole lot of them, but particularly the government, have to get real because we are driving the economy over a cliff. We are heading for the summer of 1976. That wasn't just a long, hot summer when we were young and eating ice lollies. It was the time when the UK was bailed out by the International Monetary Fund. We went cap in hand. We are now heading for that same situation. And if there is that kind of fiscal crisis, it will be the poor that suffer most.
And what do you think then? Because Rachel Reeves is basically suggesting in lots of ways, nothing to see here, it's not really our fault, this is a global predicament, everyone's spending more on borrowing, everyone's borrowing more and spending more servicing that debt.
Last summer, I'd have said that was an accurate assessment, but I'm afraid the Chancellor must accept now and be seen to accept, so financial markets believe she's going to do something about it, that that's no longer the case. The UK is now an outlier. We have the highest borrowing costs of any country in the G7. We have the highest share of our national debt that is what we call index linked. What does that mean? Strap yourself in, I'll explain it. What it means, Doobs, is that is debt, that the amount of money the government must pay in interest on that debt goes up with inflation. So when we have an inflation spike and inflation's at 3.6%, it's almost twice the Bank of England's target and heading up, interest payments on that debt then go up with inflation. The UK is certainly an outlier here, and unless the government is seen to take action, and look, they're not going to cut spending. They can't even cut $5 billion off the rate of increase of the welfare bill. We saw that because the Labour left went completely nuts. What they have to show is that they can grow the economy, grow our way out of this problem. And you cannot grow the economy if your only answer to every single problem the country has is to tax people more and spend more government money, because now we're putting up tax rates to such an extent that the tax revenues are going down because growth and the economy is being crushed and so many wealthy people are leaving.
Do you want to save a boatload of cash this summer, wherever you have a trip planned? The one thing you're going to need is access to the internet and on the go. And you can do that easily with Saily. Hit the link in the description to get 15% of your first eSIM plan ready for your trip so you can browse to your heart's content. Saily gets you a local SIM card you can use when traveling so you don't have to pay those crazy roaming fees just to send a message or check the latest news. Now, they've got plans in over 160 countries, 8 regions, so pretty much everywhere, wherever you're going, they'll be able to make sure you're connected. So how does it work? All you've got to do is this. Hit the link in the description to download the app. It will work on iOS or Android. Buy a plan. You can choose an amount of data and time frame that suits you best. And then just install the eSIM on your phone. When you land at your holiday destination, you can activate your plan instantly. And if that wasn't enough, Saily eSIMs only ever have to be installed once. So when you go on your next trip, you just buy a plan for a new country, turn that eSIM back on, and boom, you're back watching me on GBNews. I'll be using a Saily SIM on my next holiday because it's actually faster than some of the hotel Wi-Fis. You can get unlimited data if you want, so you can scroll away to your heart's content. And when you leave the hotel, you don't have to do that annoying thing of Wi-Fi hopping because you've got constant connectivity wherever you go. And they've got 24/7 support as well and a full refund policy if your eSIM isn't compatible. So get sorted for your next trip. Download Saily using the link in the description below. And if you use the code NEWS at checkout, you'll get an exclusive 15% discount on us. So click the link, download Saily, and use the code NEWS at checkout.
Matthew Laza, do you think the Labour Party, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, they've got it in them to fix this mess?
Well, the answer is I hope so. I mean, the truth of the matter is I agree with quite a lot of what Liam says. I think that the whole of the political class hasn't taken this seriously enough. We are, as a country, living beyond our means. So the Tories did it, and we had the gall and the gumption of Mel Stride today to complaining about how much data interest is costing when a huge amount of the bill that is now being serviced has run up over 14 years of the Tory government, not least during COVID when it was spend higher than almost anybody else in the world. But the Labour government hasn't made some of the tough decisions it's going to need to make. It is going to have to change the welfare state. It is going to have to get more people into work. And it is going to have to realise that, or Labour backbenchers are going to have to realise that you just can't tax because, as Liam has said, there's a crossover point where that becomes self-defeating and you're not raising any extra money. But you are, in fact, putting fewer people in work. So I think Labour's it's got 4 years to make tough decisions, implement them and start seeing heading in the right direction. But
Michael, what do you think?
I think the problem with this current Labour cohort is that they were marinated in this sort of post-2020 era where they thought that austerity was a choice and that there is a magic money tree that you can just go and shake. And like as Liam said, there is a thing called the Laffer curve, which is actually a bit of a joke to a lot of Labour backbenchers. They don't really believe it exists.
There's no laughing matter. Whoa!
Yeah, there we go. You do get to a point where your tax base will shrink, and so if their only tools in their arsenal are to tax more or to borrow more, those are both cul-de-sacs that they're going to come, crash into head first eventually.
But why is there this... Because, you hear all these conversations about wealth tax. I've lost count of how many people now are calling for this, Liam. And there doesn't seem to be this notion that actually, if you squeeze the wealthiest people, who, by the way, already contribute a huge amount of money, they will just leave. Well, I don't understand why that's not been grasped by people. Because
for ideological reasons, there are a lot of people in the Labour movement, most of the Labour backbenchers, they're massive... group of MPs, many of whom they didn't expect to get into Parliament. They're not particularly intelligent people, a lot of them, I'm afraid. For them, it's ideological. It's just, tax the rich, someone else will pay. They do think there's a magic money tree. They're completely economically illiterate. I'd like to tip my hat to Matthew. We are old mates. We've talked about politics over many years. He is a member of the Labour tribe. signed up, man and boy. Fair play. We need people who are party political in this country. I'm not that kind of person, but he is acknowledging here that there is a problem and it has got worse under Labour. The trouble is there aren't nearly enough people in the Labour movement and there aren't nearly enough people in Downing Street at the very highest level who understand these arguments the way Matthew Larser does, without wishing to,
make you blush,
embarrass
love
him. Look,
tonight.
when I was a young political correspondent in the mid and late 90s, and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were coming into Downing Street, they surrounded themselves with top people from financial markets who got financial markets and who reassured the city, reassured investors around the world that Labour wasn't going to blow up the economy the way they did in the mid-70s. Because the previous Labour government we'd had to Tony Blair and co did blow up the economy. We did have to have a bailout. Blair and even Brown, even though he's more of a big state guy than Blair, they did not blow up the economy because they made a lot of very careful financial decisions, certainly in the opening stages. And when they came into office, Doobs, the national debt was only 35% of GDP. Guess what? Rachel Reeves comes into office, the national debt is 95% of GDP.
We balanced the budget, Liam.
Yeah, two and a half times more. And the first thing she does, massive amount of cash for her public sector mates in the trade unions, massive spending decisions, deeply ideological, no real understanding of financial markets, and that is why we are paying so much more to borrow.
Well, they're learning the lessons out there when it comes to the trade union and stuff, because, of course, you'll be familiar with the fact that the resident doctors have said that they are indeed still going to continue that strike plan for Friday. But look, one of the things that caught my eye today was Ed Miliband. He was talking about Sizewell C. There was all of these lovely social media clips and whatever, and he's going on about how great Sizewell C is. But one of the things that never really got mentioned by him was the rise in the cost estimate. Sizewell C was estimated to cost about £20 billion. Today it turns out that actually it's going to be more like £38 billion. I don't understand how this is allowed to happen in public infrastructure projects like this.
Yeah, there's a particular issue with nuclear power stations because basically the same's been happening all over the world. There's only about 2 companies that can build you a nuclear power station. One's owned by the French government, and they've had the same thing all over the world, partly because they've introduced new technologies. But you're absolutely right. And look, as a country, just look at the shambles that is HS2. Which is, I was going past Euston Station in London, where it's the other day, on the bus where it's meant to go in. They're still digging up the roads, but at the moment it's not going to go there for 20 years or something. It's just ludicrous. So I think the government has tried to get a grip on some things, like HS2, which the Tories just let run out of control, but it has a lot of other difficult decisions to make. There were some signs. People like Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, said to the NHS, OK, one last big cash injection, but you've got to do a lot more bang for that extra buck. Let's see if it happens, because if it doesn't, frankly, it's not just the Labour Party is going to be in trouble, it's all of the political parties. And people like Reform chipping from the sidelines and won't let a penny be cut from anything because it might upset somebody.
Well, Starmageddon, that's what Richard Tice actually referred to this as. What's your thoughts on all these spiralling costs getting out of control? For me, it's so nonchalant the way they kind of talk about Sizewell C, and it's doubled. And that's just today's estimate, by the way. I bet my bottom dollar will increase even more.
Well, if you've ever seen a Labour junior minister try and defend a costing on a particular project, particularly with Nick Ferrari, you see the level of mathematic brilliance that we're dealing with here. I think that these spiralling debts, the servicing of our debts, and public services spending are upstream from almost every other problem that we face. And so, unless we are able to get a hold on that, Starmer is able to reinstall some party discipline with the backbenchers. At the moment, he's playing whack-a-mole without a gavel. He's trying to catch up with these spiralling debts and has no means to do it. So I think unless they get a handle on that, then nothing that they do is going to be very effective.
Luke has said, look, Michelle, at the end of the day, you're talking about debt and you're talking about trillions. It's irrelevant because you can just print all the money that you need.
Well, if that was true, Zimbabwe would be in the G7, Argentina before Milei would have been a global economic power. I'm afraid, Luke, open a history book and use some common sense. If you could just print money, then the Roman Empire wouldn't have collapsed. This is madness. I know there are economists around that will say that, but that's because they're being paid by people to say that. And when it comes to public sector infrastructure projects, our public sector procurement, when we buy really big things like nuclear power stations and big train lines, I wouldn't say on national television it's corrupt, but it's deeply incompetent, and a lot of people have got their snouts in the trough in the public sector. And a lot of this technology is redundant before it already gets introduced. HS2 is complete nonsense. We should be using, a fifth of the money for HS2 to enhance our existing rail network, electrifying the fact there's almost no electric trains in the north of England. It's completely mad.
Tell me about it.
Completely, as you know well, and I know well from spending a lot of time in the north of England. And as for paying the French government to build these massive nuclear power stations, again, loads of public sector people with their noses in the trough, going from the civil service to the private sector and then back again. We've got the technology. There's a really world-class company in Derbyshire called Rolls-Royce that have invented these things, invented them called small modular reactors. You don't need to do these massive nuclear plants anymore. You roll out your small nuclear modular reactors. They're much, much smaller. That's how you provide the baseload energy. You don't then need to bung billions of pounds to the French government to build these things. But Whitehall won't adopt these new technologies.